So, what do you got? You have the topics here. So you're the host.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, we can try this talk and see if people like it or disagree with us or send us death threats or something like
I'm
that. We'll
sure there'll
see.
be plenty of all of that. So we just
I'm
gotta have
sure.
fun.
Hey, you know, but at the same time, I think our perspectives are perhaps unique and even more of a unique collaboration given what we've done with Dr. West. I think we see the problem and we'll see.
I like that. Let's illuminate some problems and bring some fresh perspective. I'm all for that. We should probably introduce ourselves. Well, actually, no, we're doing this anonymously. We're not introducing ourselves. You just
Oh
have
yeah,
to, you just have to differentiate us based on our voice, which shouldn't be too hard. But
yeah, we're just two people.
exactly, just two random people who comment on the news. And what news will we be commenting on?
What news? The first thing I saw this morning was uh, Habib's being asked to offboard an Alaska Airline flight. I didn't even know he was in the U.S. I didn't even know he was allowed into the U.S. ever since the Russia thing. Things haven't been going as well with anybody who carries a Russian passport or citizenship. My understanding from what I've seen though was that one of the flight attendants wasn't comfortable with his understanding of English, and since they want um, people um, who understand perfect English to sit by the emergency exits, now we all know they get the extra comfort of extra space, but for that there's a possibility paying a price or having a responsibility in the case of an
Indeed.
emergency, which seems like I don't know. Haven't read the most recent statistics, but there's been a lot of crashes recently, unfortunately, and yeah, there's a lot of problems to try and fix.
Remind me of, give us a little more detail about.
Habib Nurmagomedov, he is a lightweight, former lightweight champion at the
Hmm.
UFC. Um, he's he's retired in 2021, I believe, or 2020. I think it was during COVID. He lost his father, and he only he lost his father because of COVID. His father had COVID, and he passed away. So, and after that, he said, now it's worth mentioning that his father was his trainer too. So, after that last fight, which his father wasn't by his side, he said, I have to retire now because I don't want to approach this cage or be in the cage without my father behind me, and then, or with me. And then he retired. But anyway, he's he's about as fit as you can get for even after he has retired 2 3 years ago, 4 years ago now. But he still makes some occasional appearances on the UFC as a coach, mostly. He's given some interviews before. His English, he can understand English. Won't say, you know, when you go on YouTube and people can look his interviews up. What you see from his interviews maybe 5 7 years ago is not his English today. He's improved a lot. Because back then he was still new to the UFC, new to the US. He used to come train here in, I think it's called AKA or something like that. That's where he trains in the US. And but yeah, he's a well-known, very well-known, respected figure in the MMA community. And uh, do you want uh, somebody who's capable of understanding English 100% to sit by the emergency exit? Yes, you absolutely do.
I suppose it seems like he
Um,
could understand English well enough, and if there's a plane crash, it's kind of a self-explanatory thing. I do know that you do
yeah,
have to be careful about when to release the emergency door because that will also release a slide, and if the engines are still running, the slide can just get blown away, and it's not very good to anybody.
yeah. The spin is that it was done for more of a suspicion, security because of how he looks like, and I think he was with his friends, so you got these two very
Hmm.
big guys. Maybe I mean I don't know. I've heard that he walks around Because when he was still active in the UFC before he has retired, before you could see him walking around maybe 170
Mm-hmm.
pounds, 65, because when he fights, he should make weight to 155 pounds. So he was always in that range, and it's good to stay close to that range because you never know when you have a fight. So you gotta, cutting weight is not
Mm-hmm.
an easy thing to do for these guys. It is easy, I guess. But right now, after he's retired, he's probably walking around what 185, 190. So there's like these
Yeah,
two big guys in the Middle Eastern Muslim.
certainly no monster, but
Yeah, no,
sizable,
no.
sizable
He's
bloke.
no monster, but I think they're in these small airplanes. People look bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was
It's true,
probably
it's
on
true.
a 737. There's not that much space, man. It's so tight.
No, there isn't. I was on a 737, and I was at the very back in the aisle seat. And I have also about 180 pounds, maybe a little bit lighter than that, unfortunately. But it's
Yeah.
so frustrating because I don't fit.
Mhm.
Luckily, the seat next to me was empty, so I didn't have to deal with that. But I had to
That's
deal with
good.
all the people standing in line for the bathroom, just like asses in my face, all the time. I hated it,
Yeah.
and I felt
Yeah.
very much too big. I wish I
Mhm.
was 30% smaller during that experience. Um, but it's 737s are quite small, so people do look bigger on airplanes. That's true. And it seems like he was, not allowed to board this flight for probably pretext reasons, and I don't like pretext. That's really not something that I'm a big fan of. I think we should all be honest here, and if there's something to be concerned about, then there's something to be concerned about. But I don't think you should launder your concerns in some other more respectable bias than the one that you truly have. I think that's not a very good experience. I think that happens a lot in the modern world.
It does during these times, especially. Tensions are high and approaching the inauguration day, and there's a lot of fear.
Mhm.
There's a lot of I think fear of blowback of over what's happening in Gaza and Lebanon, in the West
Yeah.
Bank, not to forget the West Bank, and Syria too. Things are not looking good for Iraq either. They are,
Mhm.
the problem. It's just in the wrong place, man. It's the place where battles happened every,
It is,
I
yes.
mean, hundreds of years. I think that's where because it's right in the middle. I don't even know it's West Asia, but the label Middle East, I think and is, I think, slowly gaining approval, even on forums and stuff like that. I've been seeing more and more. Historically, Middle Easterns will check, for example, when you're filling out a form or something, you would check white for Middle Eastern, because that's what the thing says. It says if you're from Europe, Middle East, forgot what the third one was, but yeah, that's what it says. But yeah, it's a it's a melting pot. I mean,
Mhm.
you look at people there, you'll see all colors, but people there are colorblind, but they're not. There are other ways.
This is a very interesting case. Didn't the Oh, I think my Middle Eastern knowledge is becoming blurred here, but wasn't the Soviet Union involved in the Middle East as well? I think in Afghanistan though, not Iraq, but
Yeah, the Soviet Union was occupying Afghanistan I think it was in 1980s.
yeah, I mean
Mhm.
the position of the Middle East is a fascinating one, both culturally and geographically, because it is in between Asia and the West, between Africa and the West as well. So everything comes to a head, it seems, here. These sort of sounds ugly to say these civilizational battles, but that's how it seems the mainstream foreign policy establishment thinks of them in so many words.
Mhm.
And it's really sad. It's I wish the people who live here the best, obviously. And it's just a shame to see these again ulterior motives being brought into this region.
And these people pay the price for no reason.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Very sad. Well, it looks like we solved it. Stop making them do that.
they're good boys.
Problem solved, everybody. Stop being bad. Don't kill innocent people.
No, actually, they don't listen.
Well, they'll listen. They're listening.
Yeah.
Well-
they are listening. Yeah, exactly. They don't listen.
Yes. Yeah, I don't. Why do you think American foreign policy fails so much? and so consistently, especially in this region.
The publicized intentions, I think, don't align with the actual intention.
For sure.
You can look at it from a perspective of usually in politics and stuff like that, especially when you're dealing with somebody whom you consider an enemy, you typically, and almost always these days, try to, have them think opposite of what you're thinking. Now, there's also Israel. I think Israel has an existential interest in preventing any good relationships between the U.S. and countries, and it's getting old. But yeah, again, the lobby is who facilitates these aspirations by the Israelis.
I think a lot of this is there's definitely deep religious undertones from here. I know personally, based on how I grew up in a very very Christian way, that Muslim hatred is very real, and deep down that motivates people to vote. I mean, I've heard the things they say, it's terrible, and they vote off of that. Those sentiments are not polite, and they're not acknowledged in polite circles, even liberal circles, but it's there, and that's what motivates a lot of at least people who vote in America. And I think Israel also is a part of that, because when you think about it, Judaism and Christianity and Islam, they're all Abrahamic religions, but they're about equally distant from each other. Christians and Jews have formed a sort of alliance, and I know it because my mom gets letters from the International Alliance of Christians and Jews. Like, that's literally a thing. I didn't make this up. And that sort of axis, it's driven a lot of ugliness and hatred, certainly in the Muslim world. And there are legitimate differences between.
So Christians here are taught that Muslims hate them?
I don't know. It's complicated. I haven't.
No, is that what you initially said? I'm just trying to check if I heard you right.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
More or less. It's sort of, they have a very zero-sum attitude about Christians and Muslims existing on the same earth, really. Because they think that Muslims want to take over America, basically. And you see the same sentiment in the European far right. Mm-hmm. And so they're very defensive about that. And of course you bring in the religion to it, because a lot of people sincerely believe that God came down from, well, he didn't come down, or he sent Jesus or something.
Yeah.
And they are the rightful inheritors of the earth, and anybody to usurp their claim must be destroyed. That's fundamentally how America conducts foreign policy in the Middle East. There's secular pretext to it, but a significant portion of the country believes very strongly in that. Maybe not even a majority, but there is no other mainstream alternative. There's no secular alternative view towards the Middle East in American civic discourse, and it is quite difficult.
What do you think what do you think people see so threatening about the Muslims moving, or I don't know what the problem is exactly? I mean,
let's see. I mean, there's cultural differences for sure.
Okay.
The treatment of women is often cited by people like that, and I'm not here to defend it or defend or prosecute that one way or the other. But that's often cited as a main reason, and sort of attitudes towards freedom and justice.
Yeah, let's look at that. Let's take a look at that. To me, it's like, are women really mistreated in I don't know what is it, what with like Muslims? Is that because I think it's easy to focus on it's easy to focus on these things, but I don't really know if you look at, for example, the rates, or I mean, what is it exactly about them that I'll tell you something. The treatment I've seen, the way I was taught how to treat my mother, treat my sister, treat grandma. I still to this day I treat them, and because they gave me love as I grew up, and I just feel like it's time to pay them back for what they did. But this is the way I was raised. So
Yeah.
so perhaps this is why I don't see when people talk about that. Now perhaps not perhaps, actually, statistically you'll find that, yeah, there's mistreatment of women, um in among Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs,
Certainly.
atheists,
That's
agnostics.
the argument that I think of whenever I think of that argument by the people who say those things is like, it wasn't that long ago that women in America didn't have rights, really. In fact, it was quite recent. Like my girlfriend's stepdad, when he was born in Massachusetts, his mom did not have the right to own a home because women weren't allowed to own homes in Massachusetts in the 1960s or whatever. Single women, at least. So it wasn't that long ago America had.
They could not have owned a home.
Yeah, they couldn't own homes like that. And it wasn't that long ago that women, in America were not in good straits. And as you can see throughout it's, feminism is a global struggle, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not at all restrained to Muslim communities. And Christians, of course, are the some Christians at least are at the forefront of anti-women sentiment in America. I don't think that particular example is very convincing. I mean, yeah.
My grandparents got married in the 1960s, I think early 61, or two, and ever since they did, my grandpa already had whichever house they moved to and owned. He had the deed holding her name. I know this for a fact.
And where was this, for the record?
In Baghdad, Iraq.
Yeah. Exactly. And Iraq especially, wasn't Iraq quite secular almost,
It was.
50, 60 years ago? And throughout history, if you read history, and people think of history, they think of 1800 onward, but I'm talking about from the year minus 400 or whatever, minus 1,000. Women's rights have vacillated quite drastically between even prehistoric civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an ongoing struggle everywhere.
It looks like it's everything. It looks like it's cyclical because
it is, yeah.
Yeah, these generations don't have the experience of their parents, even though they try to warn them, I told you.
Yeah.
But
and that's what I have a cousin who likes to sometimes defend the American military establishment. We were arguing about Afghanistan. He's like, but what about the women? I'm like, what do you mean, what about the women? It took women in America 200 years to get those rights, and it's supposed to happen in 20 in Afghanistan while under military occupation and fighting a war? I don't think so. That stuff, you can't make people treat women well by force. You can't establish any sort of civic value by force. You can only take away things that way,
Trump is a very polarizing figure.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes he says things and I'm like, this guy, I agree with him. Now, doesn't mean that I agree with him on everything that he but for example, he said there's a video that looks like it's going around. It says, hey, do you want to wear the, and he does this with his hand, right? And he's talking about the niqab or the khimar, whatever the one that covers nothing but the eyes, that communities, conservative people. I mean, I had a teacher who once told me that she never watched TV. I should have just had it in the back of my mind that this teacher has my fate in her hands, because she can, on an exam, she can really hurt me with her grading. And she did, actually. Eventually she did. But I asked her, I was like, you don't watch TV? That wasn't even here. That was. So there are some conservative people for sure, but the thing that Trump said was, hey, if they want to wear whatever they want to wear, just leave them whatever they want.
Yeah.
Why do we, but now when it comes the opposite, now if you go to Afghanistan and you want to wear what you want to wear, for example,
Mhm.
you're gonna be limited to what you can and what you can't do, and it's or put on as a warrior. But I think people miss the. It's an interesting question. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, for what Trump is one thing, but
Mm.
you're right. I mean, you can't. Some countries you can't go there and wear whatever you want. Singapore, I don't know if you can wear whatever you want in Singapore, but they also have quite a particular code, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that happens elsewhere in the world as well. But again, like we got to look at like the root causes of conservatism, and it's fundamentally a rejection from the global order. I think in the Middle East, at least, it's a response to that. And America and the West had definitely had something to do with that.
Yeah.
And I'm not erudite enough on the history to recount all those things, but Iraq was secular for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and they had those values, and then they don't anymore. Same with Syria. Like things were going that way, and I think it's the West needs someone to exploit, and I think that's why people have trouble comprehending that, because the deep down ingrained myth of America is that we want people to participate in the globe, right, and we want to do world trade and all that sort of things. But we don't really. Elites say that, but they don't. Like when, the Soviet Union fell, did we get better relations with Russia? Not really. We're currently actually still at war with Russia, but through a proxy in Ukraine. But the thing is, and Yanis Varoufakis brought this up. I'm sure you probably know who that is, but when Russia fell, the Russian elites realized that the United States and the West wasn't particularly interested in doing business with them, even though they wanted that. Like they wanted to be brought into the global party, into the cabal of global elites and how wealth moves, and they weren't that interested. And it's very complicated as to why they're not. But and people have these complicated explanations about the military-industrial complex and Mickey Matt, but I think a lot of it is just tribal. It's like they spent a lot of their life not liking Russians, and they're not about to start not liking Russians, not because they're not communist anymore, And it's the same with the Middle East, like this Christian supremacy, white supremacy, one might say. You gotta lower your voice when you bring up that one, but that's driving a lot of this, and you can see it in the things that people say online about Gaza in particular and the Palestinians. Which, are they any different than... And if they think that about Palestinians, like, what do they think about anyone else from the Middle East, right? Because I'm sure there are differences between Palestinian people and other nationalities in the Middle East, but the racists on Instagram don't know that difference, and that's not what they're citing either. So that sort of attitude is what... It's the attitude that some people have towards all of the Middle East and all Muslims, and it's tragic and angering. But I wish Trump's attitude was more widely felt among the people who follow him. And that goes down to Trump's relationship with his supporters, which is an interesting one. And I don't even know why Trump is doing this anymore, because he clearly just wants to be in his golf courses. He wants to be at his golf courses. He wants to golf. He doesn't want to...
I think so.
...be president.
I think so. He's been making also interesting moves lately with his government formation.
Yeah. Hannah Arendt once said about Nazi Germany. I have the exact quote somewhere, but it was like, the Nazis didn't value competence. They wanted people whose lack of creativity would be the greatest guarantee of their loyalty. And that's what Trump's cabinet is shaping up to be. People who don't have experience, they don't have their own independent power bases. They're not even that smart. They're just loyal. And they're not creative enough to be unloyal. They're not wise enough to form their own opinions and even disagree. They just don't have it in them.
Yeah, I mean, what political experience does Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah.
What does he know about international relations? But he knows about psychology. He knows he has a huge asset to control public opinion as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, assets, I should say. That's not just Facebook, it's Instagram, it's Threads, which I don't know what that is.
Nobody uses it. I thought about getting on there because I'm like, wow, I wish I was popular on Twitter, but I don't want to be on Twitter right now. But I also don't wish I was popular on Twitter, and I don't use Twitter, so I didn't use Threads, but continue.
Yeah, we have a friend who's popular somewhat on Twitter.
We do, yes. It doesn't seem to work out very well for that person. But.
I see. It's a tough position to hold these days.
Yeah, it is.
All of a sudden, it's and it's all because some people, I think, abused what they had, and I'm talking about the Democrats, for example. But they're not even Democrats anymore. And the recent loss, I think the Democrat Party will never be the same after this.
I don't see them winning again because they have no soul, right? They sold it all. They sold everything with Kamala Harris just to beat Trump, and they lost. And that's the tragic part. They took the wrong opinion on Gaza. They took the wrong opinion on working class issues. They sold everything only to lose, and they're left with nothing, not even their soul, because they sold it. That's why. And it's like, why are they even here? You know, what did the Democrats even stand for or do? That's what's interesting. But I think we might get some new and interesting fights, and perhaps some new and interesting candidates. But so I'm really interested in how 2028 is going to shape up, and even the midterms. We'll see, because like right now it feels like it's just Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries are the last remaining Democrats. Even Joe Biden is, basically dead. Kamala Harris is a non-entity.
Kamala Harris, I think she should have already started looking for a different career. This is not for her.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking it at work after the election. Like, we're never going to hear from Kamala Harris again. And she is one of the least interesting people to find herself in such... Well, she's one of the least important people to ever find herself in such a consequential role. She doesn't have anything. She's always been a careerist and a chameleon. She's been a career politician, and that works if you win, but she lost. And that's all she has. Because what else does she stand for? What is she known for? Nothing. And it's the same thing I said about Trump's cabinet picks, so their lack of creativity is the best guarantee of their loyalty. It goes for Harris, too. That's why she was picked. Because Biden knew that she wasn't going to do any freelancing. Because she fundamentally didn't believe in anything. That's what's frustrating about it. And to see all the Democrats, blame the voters, people who dared stay home instead of vote for Kamala Harris. I'm like, why would I vote for Kamala Harris? Why would anyone vote for her? I'm surprised she got as many votes as she did.
How many votes did she get?
Well, she lost the popular vote by
Lost the popular by 1%. Wow. She did well. Yeah, interesting. But still, man, that's close.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty close. Yeah, Musk, right after October 7th, Musk tweeted, I believe it was a tweet or said something. He said, basically, I think it was something in the lines of respond back with love, as in, if they did this to you, if you want to embarrass them and show them how terrible they are, then you should respond back with love, that kind of thing. And then...
Yeah, that would have actually worked.
Yeah, well... again, we go back to intentions and what they really had in mind, the Israelis. And I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they knew about it.
What's interesting about October 7th is I really hope that, the erudite people who run the world would have learned after 9/11 that you should just wait, just take a beat. Don't immediately punch back and get yourself involved in this compulsive quagmire. But they didn't do that, which was very frustrating. I'm like, okay, this is where we can do it again. Like 9/11 happened. Wouldn't everyone have rather America didn't immediately go to war over 9/11? But then again, it took a couple years because there was an invasion of Iraq, right? First.
Afghanistan was first.
Afghanistan second.
Oh, yeah, was it? Okay. Was in 2002.
Yeah, you're right. Iraq, which again, that happened in 2003, right? When they invaded a country. It's like, so a former Saudi national from Afghanistan hurt you. So then we invade Iraq 3 years later or 2 years later. It's like, no, that's you're just being greedy there.
The invasion of Iraq has nothing to do with 9/11, and even the declared, goals of the war, they had nothing to do with 9/11. It was, as you know, in 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and we could for reasons we can talk about later. Then Iraq withdrew, and practically the Iraqi military, that's when it fell after the first Gulf War in 1991. I believe about 70,000 Iraqi troops were killed. They were withdrawing. There was a famous highway, so-called highway of death, because where you see all the Iraqi military. That was inside Iraq, so this is after they withdrew from Kuwait. But the bombing took about 1.5 months, right? And 70,000.
Yeah.
But practically Iraq lost most of its tanks, most of its airplanes, and was practically just a hollow. It was a balloon, basically. It was hollow. Yeah, there's nothing left in it. And then come sanctions, embargo. You can't sell oil. Nobody wants to buy oil. And then when you sell in the black market, obviously people take advantage of that, and they start bargaining, and you can't really sell it for the price set by OPEC and all these things. So, and that was an interesting decision. They do say that George Bush Sr. had the chance to continue, and everybody in the military was telling him, we could continue this and we could invade Iraq because it's fallen, it's done. And George Bush Sr. then refused to do that, and he said, no, withdraw to Kuwait. So his son just came to finish his dad's job, or what?
With Dick Cheney, I might add, because Dick Cheney was also present in the first Bush administration. I think he was the CIA director.
He was.
I think.
So, Afghanistan, yeah, sure. 9/11, they had Al-Qaeda or something. Which is true, by the way. In the 1980s, as you mentioned, the Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan to fight, to occupy it. And later on, the United States and Saudi Arabia worked together to recruit a lot of fighters and supply them with money, weapons, and training. And people don't realize how much these military or militant organizations and terrorist organizations and all these, how much they actually cost to run.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you could be spending, this is 1980, so you gotta adjust inflation a lot. These used to spend, every little group would be spending $2,000 a day. Training, food, shelter, clothes, bullets, weapons, intelligence, cars, gasoline. I mean, it's a huge supply line. It's a military. It's just not well equipped, but it's well trained. Because you also have to kind of limit their. You don't want them to become too powerful. You try to control. You want a small fire, but you want to be able to control the fire. Then I think the difference maker was the Stinger shoulder-held anti-craft missiles back then. They could follow a Soviet helicopter, bring it down by following the heat signal. So they were pretty advanced, I guess, back then. And that hurt the Soviets so much that they had to withdraw eventually, and they collapsed later on. I think a year or two later. And then this got divided into the different states we see today. Ukraine is one of them. Kazakhstan and there's a lot of Soviet states.
That's fascinating. And I wonder how these militant groups get their money now. That's another fascinating part.
So
Iran, certainly one of them.
Yeah. So as an example, I can tell you about Al Qaeda. For example, And this is from watching former and reading about former Al Qaeda fighters who then later on went back to their home country, and a lot of them were jailed because the government knew about them. So it's an interesting, they know. The governments don't want somebody to come from the outside with extremist ideology, well trained, and who knows how to cause damage domestically. So they sent him to jail. Later, there was a lot of change in Egypt, as you know, and he was released. At any rate, his was through a hospital donation. So Saudi government or something, they would donate money to they will say this is King whatever field hospital or something like that, and then that's how they launder money into the country. And this is what these organizations are actually. The reason the reason you see a persistence in demanding that foreign countries open organizations, nonprofits, it's usually a key request from these countries. And the reason is that's how you funnel money into a country to and then you supply, you once you bring that money in, you launder it, you can pay domestically. And so that was one example. Yeah, I mean, these people are connected, even you talk about intelligence services, they have people on the ground. They know exactly what's going on. And you have satellites and a lot of surveillance, which of course nowadays, we all saw how Hezbollah leaders picked one by one, mostly because of smartphones.
It's a pretty scary world out there, especially with the intelligence. I mean, I feel like there's certain actors know more than they ever have. And it's pretty terrifying. Yeah, I'd love to. Maybe we should have a guest on who's an expert on the flow of international money illegally. That would be pretty fascinating. One of the other fascinating things is, like, where does all the drug money in America go? Like, these homeless people, they spend a lot of money on drugs. Or the people who are addicted to drugs, at least. And where does it go? Like, that's a lot of money. If you have a whole country, a lot of them are addicted.
Yeah.
Spending $100 a day. Like, that money's got to go somewhere. And I have a hard time believing that it's all underground. That nobody really knows where it's going.
No, you have corrupt police, or those people sometimes wouldn't mind, cut me a piece, cut you a piece. There's a lot of money because of the risk associated with smuggling and trading, and consuming is also risky, but yeah.
I saw in like a Deutsche Welle investigation that like about estimated like 2 to 3% of world GDP is illicit, or it's illegal basically. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of world. That's a lot of dollars there. And if you ask any politician, hey, do you want to erase 3% of world GDP? They would say, no, we don't want to do that. And the answer doesn't really change if it's illegal, right? Money's money. It's green.
Yeah.
People don't like it when number goes down.
It's just the government saying, you're not paying taxes. They want their cut. They're the middleman on everything.
Oh yeah, and they don't have any problem when it's opiates, but they get their cut at least. Or legal ones.
Yeah.
All sorts of legal pharmaceuticals that are way too expensive at the very least.
Too expensive. Sometimes you think like these doctors are just licensed drug dealers.
Yeah.
I'm not saying all of them. Obviously, a lot of them help a lot of people. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, certainly a lot of doctors can be. I mean, certainly a lot of them were in the opioid crisis. They're very complicit in that.
I've heard horror stories about opioids. Like you do inject you with a few, and suddenly you're hooked, and then you seek it, something like that.
One way people can get hooked on them, you go to a surgery and then you get them afterwards. And if you have a personality, or if you're prone to addiction, then that can certainly be a very harmful thing to do. But then again, you're in a lot of pain, so you don't want to be in pain either. You don't want to be addicted to opiates. But sometimes life hurts, and it's unfortunate. And opiates are not what's necessary. I always find it funny that Karl Marx used to say that religion is the opiate of the masses. But now opiates are the opiates of the masses. Don't need no religion anymore. Got the real thing.
There is a significant decrease in, I guess, religiosity in the world. I wonder if it'll be A lot of people blame religion all the time, and sometimes I think actually you should keep the religion because these people are insane, and I think
Yeah,
it
yeah,
does a lot of good
certainly.
than not.
Certainly, when you look at Trump's cabinet, that's scary because those people are very conservative, but they're not very religious. They're seekers of vice, and
Like Zionists.
they're bad boys. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I generally agree with you. I think that if people were more religious and if they truly believe that they would be judged based on their actions after death, then that might change stuff. But now, and you can blame capitalism for that. People, and capitalism in particular, they don't need people with morality. They don't need people who believe that their actions in life will be judged by any sort of moral um, absolute. No, they need animals. They need people who want that bag and they want it bad.
Like consumers.
Yeah, they want consumers and they want wolves. They want the wolves who make the money and take advantage of people. I mean, that's fundamentally what it's all about. I mean, those shareholders and stockbrokers and massive investors. I don't think they're religious. I mean, how could they? How could they? I mean, they can't be blind to the harm that they're causing. Somebody must know. Somebody must tell them. They just can't care because money is the supreme valuer of what is good. That's how people. That's what people use as a measure of a good life, not a moral one. But there is no measure of a moral life because there's not much religion anymore.
I from first-hand experience, I agree.
I think that way sometimes too. It's like, man, if I had more money, wouldn't life be better? Like, but why though? Like, why would it be? And also, what do I have to do to get that? Who would I have to sell out? You know?
Yeah. I had a college professor who was a that guy. He was a saint, really. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as and one day he was teaching engineering ethics, and that's the kind of person he is, and that's why he teaches that class, because he's all about that. He's passionate about being ethical and all that. And he said after college he worked for a tobacco manufacturer,
Hmm.
and he had to quit later on because of the things he saw, and all the additives that were being literally from the floor and put in the mix. And he said, I just couldn't, I couldn't see that and just, accept to be part of it. And then he said, well, then I left that place. And then he stared for a second. He said, well, they all did well for themselves, but I guess this is better.
Yeah, it's true.
So he's
It's tough to be moral. Certainly, it's hard to live your values in this economic system. You almost have to abandon it just to get ahead. That's really hard. I did a sociology degree, and all the recruiting emails were from the police departments because they love to hire sociology graduates. That's like kind of the premium bachelor's degree that they like them to have. It's basically like a social worker with a gun. But I was like, no, I can't do that. It's not. Those are not my values. I don't think the police right now are what people really need, and it's not what I can do. And do I have as much money as I would if I was a police officer? No, I don't.
They get paid well.
Yeah, usually they do. I mean, it depends on where you are. Like in Seattle, you get paid pretty well. If you're in a small town, probably not so much. But and there's different levels of the job too. Seattle cops, they get more training, and they have more, professional responsibilities and more oversight than you do in some other places. So, there's levels to it. You're an engineer, right? Or you do something like that. You have a degree which you could get hired by Lockheed Martin or something, right?
Yeah, well, no, I'll pass on these guys. I worked. I've gotten close, to be honest, but that was a while back, and ever since then, I've been trying to stay in civilian applications and not go into. Sometimes it's difficult because these companies are connected more than there's a lot of contracts between them. There's a lot of smaller parts that other companies make. I mean, when you talk about airplanes, for example, it's millions of pieces, and these pieces can range from like a hand kind of size, a human hand kind of size, to to a huge part, like the wings, for example. But these smaller companies, they're not all made by the same company. That's how things get. That's how you get a lot of contracts and subcontracts and all that. So, but but despite that, I've been trying to stay away. Just try to stay next to civilian applications. Hospitals, schools. Do something a bit more. I feel like try to blood away from my hands as I can. So.
Yeah, certainly. I have a friend who used to work for Boeing, and we live in the region of the country where there's a lot of Boeing, but they own significant shares of a lot of those suppliers and those smaller companies that you were talking about, which is part of the reason why there's no Airbus in Seattle, because since Boeing owns those small suppliers, they're like, no, you can't work with Airbus. We won't allow that. So then Airbus can't come here. So Boeing basically has a monopoly on who is allowed to sell to whom for their suppliers, right? And it's only Boeing and their allies that they're allowed to sell to. I mean, I'm imagining they have similar tricks, right, and mechanisms to ensure that they get the military contracts that they get.
Well, they own a lot of the skilled labor too.
They do, yeah. And there are unions, and they do have a union. So.
Boeing does have a union. Their military applications, I think I've never touched anything of that nature. They do hire a lot of people in this region as well, and for right now, sudden changes are not comfortable. So, I mean, hey, yeah, I don't know what to say to that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a rock and a hard place where we find ourselves in this American life. So I don't know where it goes from here, really. I mean, but that's why we're on this podcast, so people can.
Yeah, let's hope people get reasonable and I like we also discussed religiosity and religion and all of that. I don't know if less religion will mean more peacefulness. I doubt it. I think we'll find. It can be dangerous too at the same time, but we'll
yeah, certainly if you own more people from their morality, but I think if the lack of religion would result in something positive, it would be because objective sort of moralities and moral discussions became a prominent part of life, which it's possible that could happen, and I hope it does.
Yeah, so. I agree.
Brilliant. Well, that was a fun podcast. We did it. My phone's low on battery, so.
Okay, yeah, me too.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to our thoughts. All maybe 20 of you if we're lucky. So if we get 20, I'll be happy. Anyway, enjoy your day, everybody.